Hello, welcome to my session. My name is Johannes Fiala, and I will speak about how you can document your REST API and generate client code using Swagger and Spring. First of all, a short question. Who in here is using Spring? And who in here is already using Swagger? Okay, thank you. So in the next few minutes, I will show you how you can provide documentation for your REST API, access your API with a browser using Swagger UI, generate client code for accessing your API, and finally, how to get a nice picture of your API services and models. So what is Swagger? Swagger is a language-agnostic interface to REST APIs, and it allows to discover and understand the capabilities of a service. So it removes the guesswork in calling the service, and it renders the API in JSON syntax. So in short words, it's simply a standardized way to describe how an API works and which services and models and properties it provides. So the technology stack we will be using for the demos is Spring. I use Spring Boot, but you can use the libraries for Spring REST applications as well. So you just have to use Spring. And the next is the Springfox integration libraries. They are providing the API docs, so they are necessary to generate the Swagger API docs. Then the Swagger UI to access the API using a browser. And finally, Swagger-Codegen, which allows you to generate client stubs in quite a few languages. I will show you later. So this is the big picture. On top, you have the REST API. This is your REST API. And you add the Springfox libraries to your web application, and then the API is automatically documented. So you have the rough documentation for the operations and the attributes and the model. And this is used by Swagger UI to generate a UI which you can use to test your REST API and to explore your REST API. And on the other side, Swagger-Codegen, which allows you to generate the client stubs. And it's important that Swagger UI and Swagger-Codegen use the API docs only for analyzing the capabilities of the service you provide. So for analyzing the REST API, during the call, when the Swagger UI or the client code calls the REST API, this is done directly, so there's no interference of the API docs here. So it's the generated client code is able to work independently of the documentation. A few words about the Springfox libraries. They provide a complete API docs for every REST controller in your application. So for all the services, the supported verbs, for example, get, post, and so on, the request parameters and the request body, the response codes and response body, and it also provides many customization options. So it allows you to hide attributes or to provide custom data types if you need to. Swagger UI is a JavaScript application to access your REST API with a browser. It will list all services directly from the dynamic API docs. So you do have no additional work with it. It's just providing the services. And the big advantage is it is always consistent with your API. So you don't have to generate the API docs manually or with a build task. The API is always up to date. Swagger-Codegen is the client code stub generator. It's a simple command line program which is responsible to generate the client stubs, which are completely customizable. The supported languages are, for example, Java, C#, Dart, Flash, Groovy, JAX-RS, Node.js, Objective-C, Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby, Scala, and so on. So there's really a big number of languages that are supported right now you can immediately use. And you can put this way, you can provide an SDK for your REST API in these languages. And yeah, you don't have to stick to Java. And if the other developers want to use PHP, they can do so, and they get all the features of the generated client code. So why should you generate client code? It ensures consistency of your client code with the API. So it makes sure the client code is valid with the API. And it makes code completion possible. So you get, for the generated client code, you get full code completion, and you don't have to remember all the methods that you support or the model classes, and it makes using your API really easy. And if you add a description to your operations and to your models, developers will be able to read it directly in the generated client code. And finally, if the API changes and it breaks somehow, which shouldn't happen, you get compilation errors. So you will immediately notify if there has been a breaking change. So now let's start with the demo. First of all, I want to show how much you have to do to activate the Swagger libraries and activate the generated API docs. First of all, you have to add dependencies. So this is everything you need. It's the Springfox Swagger 2 libraries. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah. So this is the first step. And the second step is on the application class. You have to add this annotation, enable Swagger 2. And that's pretty much it. So this is all you have to do. And the library will then pass all your REST controllers. For example, I have this really simple REST controller class, which is providing a method to read a user and to search for users by state. It's just an enumeration, and to save a user. So it's really simple, just for demo purposes. And if you want to use the Swagger UI or the Swagger-Codegen, this is all you have to do. So if you don't want to put additional work to it, you simply can use it right now. And I will show it. So first of all, this is how the documentation looks like. So you have a list of all the paths that are supported by your application. You have the HTTP verbs. And if I'll take a look here, you have the request parameters, a list of the request parameters, and a list of the response codes that are supported. And here is a reference to the class. And the class definition is right at the bottom. So this is how the class looks like in the Swagger documentation style. It lists all the properties and the data types. So just for comparison, this is how the class looks like in Java. And in the Swagger spec, the Swagger spec looks like this. I will make it a bit larger. So long gets converted to int 64, and an enumeration looks like this. So it's human readable, you can read it, but well, it's automatically generated, and usually you don't have to read it. You want to use your API, and this is how it looks like. This is the controller class. I can click on it, and I have all the HTTP verbs that are supported. And let's create a user. And for the post operation, I think it's really nice. You see the request body here, and I can click on this body, and then I can simply fill it in. So for the enumeration here below, I can here switch to the model class definition, and I see which attributes are optional. And I also see the enumeration here. So I don't have to guess which values are supported. I simply see them directly in the UI, and I can create it. So let's send it to the server. Okay, it worked. So now let's query for it. There's the get operation, and I see the ID is required. Simply enter the ID, and I also see the data type, so I know what I have to enter here, and I ask the server for this, and here it is. So it's really nice to explore the API. If I don't have any knowledge of it, I can simply click through it, and well, if you would like to provide more documentation, you have the description here. You can add a description for your operation. You can also add implementation notes that get displayed here. And you can add the required attributes to the attributes, and you also can add a description for the attributes. So that's finally what documentation is about. So you can add documentation if you like to, but you don't have to. So just in the case you want to give the user more description, you can, but it's up to you. And something I really liked is if you are searching for an enumeration, the UI also allows you to pick from a list. So it's really nice. If you have an enumeration as a parameter, you can simply pick the value and search the server. That's it. So it's really simple to use, and I think it's nice for exploratory testing and to provide first access to your API. However, usually we like to access the API using a programming language. So I picked Java for the demo. And all I have to do is I need to run the Swagger-Codegen to generate the client stubs. And this looks like, not sure if you can see it at the top, but it looks like this. So it's simply a command line call, and I say I want the language Java. I say where should the files get stored, and where should I read the API docs from. And then I can simply run it. So let's try it. So now it reads the API documentation from the server, directly from the server, and I can refresh here. And then the generated services and model classes will show up here. And I can open my test class now. And if I look at the object, I get code completion here for all the properties it supports, and for the API as well. So I simply get this list of the supported operations. I can directly use the API with the language I like. And well, I think it's really nice. You have no learning overhead, and you also can read the description of the service. So it's the same as if I would call the Java service directly. So it's no difference. I'm simply using the REST API. It's somewhere out there, but it's like in a local Java application. Now let's change a bit here. Show how to break this. And add a new attribute. Just make sure I'm really using it. So now I have to start again. And when I take a look at the Swagger UI, I simply refresh it, and I see, oops, one more. I have to change this one, okay. So I change the minimum user here, and you see the location is here, and the about attribute has vanished. So it's immediately updated. And if I regenerate the client code now, you see it is breaking. So it's really nice. And you see, if there are new attributes, you also see them immediately. So I have the location here and can immediately use it. And if you want to add a documentation, I will show you how this looks like. You have different annotations. So for the operation level, you have the API operation annotation, where you can add the description. You can add which API response codes you want to support and the message to show in the API. And for the model class, it's the API model annotation on the class level and the API model property annotation on the property level. And here you see how I specify if the attribute is required or not. So it's Swagger specific right now. So finally, I want to show you how it looks like graphically. So I get this small green icon here at the top. I can click on it. And this is what it looks like. So you get a nice picture of your API. You will see all the operations that are supported. You can click on them, and then you get a nice picture window which shows the supported verbs and the request parameters. So if you want to show what you have done in the last day to your boss, you can show this. And you see how the API grows if you are adding additional model classes and operations. And you can also click on the model classes, And then you see the properties and the data types. So yeah, what I showed to you is first of all the Springfox libraries. They provided the API documentation. They are completely dynamic, always consistent. The Swagger UI, which you can use to explore the API. I think it's great for testers and co-developers to try out the API. Swagger-Codegen to generate the client stubs and get code completion and keep your clients up to date automatically. And finally, the Chrome plugin, which I showed, is Swagger.ed, which allows you to display the API graphically. Yeah, this is what we had to do to activate it. Only add the Maven dependencies and enable Swagger 2, and that's it. This is the list of the main annotations that are supported. There are more, but I picked them for first glance. So you have the API operation annotation for the methods, the add API response annotation to define the error codes, and for the model classes, the API model annotation and API model property annotation for your fields. And JSON, you can use JSON ignore to simply hide an attribute in the API. For Swagger UI, you can ship it together with your REST service. It's simply a JavaScript application. I copy it to the web apps folder of my application. And yeah, it makes accessing your services really easy, and you should protect it if necessary, of course. For Swagger-Codegen, it's a command line program, and you can integrate it with your built environment, for example, using Ant. And finally, the Swagger.ed to display the API graphically. So who is using Swagger right now? PayPal has picked it up, Microsoft, and Amazon is offering an API gateway for the Amazon Web Services. You can import the Swagger definitions there and manage them using the Amazon Web Services. So Amazon also has picked it up, that's great. And if you want to know more about Swagger, there is a Birds of a Feather session on Thursday at 21 o'clock, at 9 o'clock in the evening. And I will show there how you can get code completion for an API using Swagger, which is not at all supporting Swagger. I picked the Facebook Graph API, and I think it's really nice because Swagger is only a documentation for a REST service, so you can add the documentation without touching the API, and you can use the documentation to access it using Swagger UI and to generate client code stubs from. So if you have an external library you cannot touch, you are able to add the Swagger definitions yourself. Maybe they will pick it up somewhere in the future, but you can use it right now if you are programming often against the API, then you can use code completion with the Swagger-Codegen. So I will quickly show you how this looks like. So let's take a quick look at the Facebook API. Who is using the Facebook Graph API right now? No? One, okay. So yeah, I think it's a quite big API. It supports lots of attributes, And they built the Graph API Explorer, where you can simply add attributes and query for it. Let's try it out. And what I don't like about this is it's something which is specific to Facebook, and they programmed it. But the Swagger UI is completely dynamic and independent of any API, and they are building a specific web application, and I can do the same in Swagger UI. I will show it. So it looks like this. So the full schema here they are only showing attributes I requested, and I have no documentation here. If I want to know the documentation, there's a special parameter I have to add, and then I get the metadata of the whole request. Let's refresh it. Okay. Let's reduce the list of fields. And so this is the metadata that the Facebook API is generating right now. So you have a description of all the attributes, but it's not presented in a standard way. It's API specific. And if I take a look at it with the Swagger UI, it looks like this. So I have the full list of all attributes that are provided by the API. It's a huge list. And I will show how you can extract this from an API using Swagger-Codegen. It's just a few lines of code. It's quite simple. It's just the workflow, how you can do this. And I will show it to those that are interested. And yeah, this is possible for any API which doesn't support Swagger, but somehow provides metadata you can extract. For Facebook, it's just the metadata here. And if you have another API you would like to try this, you can also come to my session, and maybe we can take a look at it and figure out how you can use Swagger-Codegen to generate the client stubs from this. So this would be really nice. And yeah, you can also send me using Twitter or the question application if you have an API you are interested in, so I can prepare maybe for this. Some resources about Swagger. The main page is Swagger.io. There you find everything about Swagger. And so far, I only showed the Spring part, so the Spring integration. There is a huge number of open source projects for different, if you're not using Spring. And yeah, you can simply look it up and look if the matching integration is available for you. The SpringFox integration is independent of Spring. This is just a separate open source project. They are really active. If you have questions, you can post it there, and usually you get a response within a few hours. And for Swagger UI and Swagger-Codegen, these two projects are directly supported by the company behind Swagger, and this is also very active. So let's take a look. Are there any questions directly from the audience? Okay. So if you have questions, you can go to the microphones if you like. simply shout it out.
Which company is behind Swagger?
It's a Smart Bear company, but the standard, the Swagger specification standard, is developed with other companies. So Microsoft and PayPal are also using it, and it's a standard, and I think it's the mostly used standard right now. So but it's not the only way to do it. But I think especially the integration part is really nice and really interesting to use. And yeah, it's just one annotation and one dependency, and you can try it. Any other questions?
Hello?
Yes? Right now, unfortunately not. But I think currently it's API specific. So you have an annotation where you can switch required flag, and you can put the range of that is supported. But right now it's not supported. But I think they will add it in the future. It's the next logical step. Any other question?
Is working with JAX-RX?
For JAX-RX, please look it up in the open source integrations. It's for Spring. I showed you the Spring integration. For JAX-RX, please, you have to look it up yourself.
So he's working with JAX-RX?
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Hello?
I can't. Yeah. So yeah, pardon? Great. Okay, one guy told it's working with JAX-RX. Great.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. It's
I'm
great.
using at the moment the Enunciate library. How would you compare Swagger with Enunciate? Do you know Enunciate?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. You can show it to me afterwards, and we can take a look at it together. Any other question?